All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Iyar, Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory and L'zecha nishmas their grandfather Yosef ben Shmuel Aron, Marc Karstaedt for dedicating the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of his mother Chana Bat Shraggai, and Day of Learning sponsor Rabbi Chaim and Malki Wecker, Li'ilui Nishmas Chaim's grandfather Mr. Sai Beik, Shlomo ben Chaim Tzvi, whose yahrzeit is today, who really, Mr. Beik, Zichron Livracha, was one of the charter members of our Daf Yomi. He was part of our first cycle, was a pillar of the shul. Again, for those of you who have been here for a little bit of time, you know that Mr. Beik was often here early afternoon on Shabbos afternoon preparing Shalosh Shuddis. Was an individual who was incredibly committed to the shul in a very quiet and understated way, without any need for praise, without any need for accolade. Just saw the incredible merit and service, and we hope that his neshama has an aliyah. Was also, Moshe Abramson made a very nice recommendation to me that maybe what we'll do is over the next 45 days, Emir Hashem, we'll dedicate each day of the shir in memory of one of the Kiddushim of Meron. That way, again, hopefully connecting with their neshamas just a little bit in an effort to become one, feel part of this incredible tragedy of Klal Yisrael. So today we dedicate our learning Li'ilui Nishmas Menachem Zekbach. Menachem Zekbach was 24 of Modi in elite, who Rahman al-Islam left behind a 1-year-old child together with a pregnant wife. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And we'll say with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Chav Gimel. We have a lot to do today. We have enough time, Hashem. We are picking up on Chav Beis and with Beis 22b, and we left off in the widest of the lines, the first of the widest of the lines. We left off yesterday right after the discussion regarding Al Ti Tzadik Harbe. Right, remember again that Shaul fails to carry through on the command of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to wipe out Amalek, because suddenly again he's having this dramatic theological challenge. How could I wipe out an entire nation when Egla Arufa is brought even just for one neshama? To which the Baskol comes out and says, Al Ti Tzadik Harbe. Don't be so righteous. Don't be frummer than God. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you to do something, by definition it is good and just. My obligation is simply to carry through. B'shash amrlo l'shol, shol l'doeg, sovato paga b'kohanim. And when again, I will say, remember again, this is the terrible catastrophe where Shaul ordered the execution of Nov Ir HaKohanim. He wiped out an entire city of Kohanim because he thought that they aided and embedded David. And remember again, at this point in time, Shaul sees David as his mortal enemy. He commands Doeg to go ahead and wipe out the Kohanim. Yotza Baskol v'amralo al tirsha harbe. Do not be such a terrible Rasha. Amar Rav Huna. So we'll say it's interesting when it says al ti tzadik harbe al tirsha harbe. It's interesting that almost like what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling us is, at the end of the day, no one could be incredibly righteous or perpetually righteous. No one could be perpetually wicked. Try to find the right medium. Try to find the derech al-mutzah, the middle path. Al ti tzadik harbe, al tersha harbe. You don't have to be overly righteous, but you also can't be overly wicked. Try to find that right balance in life. Incredible. Amar Rav Huna, both says a beautiful Gemara. Rav Huna, kamalo chali v'lo margish gavra de marisaye. How lucky! If you look at Rashi says kamalo chali v'lo margish gavra de marisaye. Rashi says kamasamuchu muftach v'intzarch lachlos v'lidog. How lucky and confident a person is, and how little they have to worry. Mikora, Misha Kodesh Baruch Hu Ba'ozro. So we'll say how much confidence and how little worry a person has to have if they know that the Ribono Shel Olam is in their corner assisting them. The Yomar says, what are examples of this? The Yomar says, Shaul ba'achaz va'asalo, because for example, Shaul committed one aveira, and yet ultimately again he was punished for it. David b'shtayim v'lo alsalo. David committed 2 aveiras, but yet ultimately again HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not allow those aveiras to adversely impact him. So we'll say the Gemara is contrasting David and Shaul. Shaul as someone with whom Hashem has forsaken, and David as someone who has the ability to depend on the Ribono Shel Olam. So the Gemara is saying how lucky you are when the Ribono Shel Olam is in your corner, Why? Because at the end of the day, you don't even have to worry about your averos impacting you. But again, so the Gemara says, let's see. The Gemara says, David b'shtayim, Shaul ba'achos mahi. What was Shaul's sin? So the Gemara says, Mai said the Agag. It was the episode of Agag, and remember again, that's the Amalek. And Shaul's failure to wipe out Amalek ultimately cost him the crown. Baha'ika Mai said the Nov Ira Kohanim. What about the episode where Shaul wiped out Nov, the city of Kohanim? Amai said the Agag ksiv nichanti kim lachti es Shaul. The Melech. Ultimately, you're going to both say, even though you're right, Shaul was held responsible for what happened in Nov, but he lost the monarchy because of what happened with Agag, the king of Amalek. David b'shtayim, what were David's two averos? Maininhu, the Uriah uda sasa. His two averos were the fact that he had Uriah killed. Remember again, he ordered Uriah to be placed on the front lines of the battle in order that he would be killed. And Hassasa, I will say, Hassasa literally means incitement. Rashi understands that this is a reference to the fact that at the end of David HaMelech's life, he ordered a census. We saw in yesterday's daf how careful one has to be to avoid counting Jews. Yet David HaMelech, before he died, ordered a direct census. So I will say, yet, interestingly enough, David HaMelech committed these two averos, yet the Ribono Shel Olam found the way to forgive him for it. Ultimately, as Rashi, I shouldn't say it's not really forgiveness. It's also lo l'ra'ah, right? Ultimately, again, we'll say it that these averos did not adversely impact David HaMelech. But what about the episode of Bathsheba? Why are you only counting two averos? Is there not also the episode of Bathsheba? Hasam ifra'u minei. David, there, we'll say by Bathsheba, punishment was exacted from David HaMelech. So you'll say the Gemara is referring to episodes where a person committed an infraction and we don't see a stated punishment. So David HaMelech with Uriah and with the census, we don't see a stated punishment. The Gemara says, what about Bathsheba? Bathsheba, there was a punishment. What was the punishment? That the Navi says to David, David, you are going to pay fourfold for the young lamb. The young lamb was a reference to Bathsheba, and ultimately, again, David HaMelech is told he's going to pay fourfold. There's going to be a fourfold punishment for what happened with Bathsheba. What's the fourfold punishment? So the Gemara says, Yeled, the fact that his infant child died. Amnon, we'll say, remember again, Amnon is the episode where Amnon raped his half-sister Tamar. These are all children of David HaMelech. Tamar was the rape of Tamar. Avshalom, we'll say, and I remember again, you know the story, Avshalom goes and kills Amnon, but as a result has to flee from Eretz Yisrael, has a falling out with his father. So we'll say, so again, four punishments or four repercussions for the episode of Bathsheba, to which the Gemara says, Ay, bahasam nami ifra'u minei. But I will say, but again, there also, the punishment was exacted from David HaMelech. T'chsiv, vayiten Hashem dever by the census also. By the census also there was a punishment. What was the punishment by the census? Vayiten Hashem dever ba'am min aboker va'ad eis moed. So there was a punishment also by the census. Hasam lo ifra migufe. So we'll say, here's the difference. By the census there was a punishment, but there was no punishment exacted from David HaMelech himself. There was no punishment to his guf. The Gemara says, Hasam nami lo ifra migufe. But one second, even with the episode of Bathsheba, as much as there's a fourfold punishment, none of those directly impacted the guf of David, right? Yeled, Amnon, Tamar, Avshalom, those were all his children, but they didn't impact his body. Lo yifra migufe. It's not true. David HaMelech was also punished physically. Damrav Yehuda Amarav, Shisha Chadashim Nitztara David Uparshem and Sanhedrin, V'nistalka Menu Shechina. It's not true. In the aftermath of the episode of Bathsheba, David HaMelech was afflicted with saras for 6 months, and as a result, the Sanhedrin separated from him. The Shechina, Ruach HaKodesh, left him. D'chsiv, Yashuvu Yirecha V'yodei Odosecha, Ksiv, Hashiva Li Sasan Yishecha. I v'hamarav, Kibel David Lashon Hara, right? But also there's another episode. What another Aveira of David HaMelech, which is he was Makabal Lashon Hara. So Rashi points out over here that this refers to an episode with Mipi Boshes and Siva. Mipi Boshes was the one surviving member of Shaul's household, right? He was a son of Yona's son. So interestingly enough, Mipi Boshes, so David HaMelech made a covenant with Mipi Boshes. When David HaMelech is on the run from Avshalom, so he sees Tziva, and Tziva was the servant of Mipi Boshes. And David says to Tziva, why didn't he join me as I'm fleeing from Yerushalayim? To which Tziva lied, and Tziva said, Mepiboshes is rejoicing in the fact that now you have been overthrown, just like you overthrew his grandfather. Now that was a lie. That was like Tziva was angling for David HaMelech's favor. So we'll say, so David HaMelech was Mekabel the Lashon Hara. So why isn't that sin reckoned over here as well? Kishmuel Amar Lo Kibel David Lashon Hara. Because we'll say, Macholkes and Shmuel holds that it was not Mekabel Lashon Hara on Mepiboshes. Although Rav Nami Damar Kibel David Lashon Hara, and according to Rav, who says that David was Mekabel Lashon Hara, Ha'ifra Minei. Punishment was exacted from David for this particular Aveira. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, B'sha'asha Amar Lo David Mepiboshes. Amarti Atta V'tziva Techalko Es Asada. Because we'll say, interestingly enough, when David was Mekabel Lashon Hara, ultimately again about Mepiboshes, when he orders Tziva, he gives all of Mepiboshes' property to Tziva. When he then finds out ultimately again that Tziva maybe made up the story, he splits the property between Tziva and Mepiboshes, which also is inappropriate because Mepiboshes did not do anything wrong, yet David seized his property from him. So the Bas Kol comes out when David HaMelech says that and says the same way, Amarti, Ata v'tziva techalko es asada, Yotza Bas Kol v'amra rechavam v'yiravam yichalko es hamalchus. So it's actually really a profound idea that at the time when David HaMelech inappropriately split the estate of Mepiboshes and divided it between Mepiboshes and Tziva, Bas Kol came out and said, just like you divided up this estate, so too I will divide up your kingdom between Rechavam, who was the son of Shlomo HaMelech, David HaMelech's grandson, and Yeravam ben Nevat, who becomes the first king over new Malchus Yisrael, which I will say such a profound idea. What's the connection there? Okay, David made a mistake, and even if you want to say it wasn't Mekabel Lashon Hara, so because he inappropriately went ahead and divided up an estate belonging to Mepiboshes, therefore the monarchy is going to be split. It's a very, very strange thing. So perhaps the Pashup Pshat in the Gemara is the primary job. Also, this is already going back to the coronation of Shaul. The primary job of a melech is to go ahead and provide an orderly society. That's the job of a melech, to make sure that general society is just, that general society is moral, that general society is good, that people treat each other appropriately. And when David HaMelech is Mekabel Lashon Hara and seizes someone's property in an inappropriate way, it fundamentally undermines the entire mission of the monarchy. It fundamentally tears apart the fabric of the monarchy, to the point that the Gemara says, you undermine the fabric of the monarchy will become undone with the splitting of the kingdom of Israel. An incredible Gemara. So we'll say the Gemara goes weiter. You see from here, by the way, how just important it is, day in and day out, to be a good person, to be a just person, to be an honest person. We can't have a normal society if we don't treat each other correctly. It's good to be pious, and it's good to be a tzaddik, and it's good to learn a lot of Torah, and it's good to learn a lot of chesed. That's all good. That's all good. But at the end of the day, you have to be a good person, a solid good person, day in and day out. Incredible. Ben Shana Shaul b'malchus. So let's listen to this. So Shaul was 1 year into his monarchy. So the Gemara says, over here, quoting the pasuk, Ben Shana Shaul b'malchus shtei shana malach al Yisrael. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna ke ben shana shlo tam chet. So Rav Huna says Shaul was so righteous that he was like a 1-year-old who never sinned, who never tasted the taste of sin. So Rav Nachman says maybe he was like a 1-year-old whose diaper is dirty, right? He's always smeared with dirt. So we'll say, in other words, maybe the comparison to a 1-year-old is not to highlight his personal piety, but maybe the comparison to the 1-year-old is just as the 1-year-old is, often is covered in his own shmutz. So too Shaul was covered in a lot of shmutz as well. So we'll listen to this. Achviu le Rav Nachman siyuta b'chameh. That night, Rav Nachman spoke disparagingly about Shaul. That night he had a dream. And in the dream, a group of destructive angels came to visit him. Amar na'anesi lachem atzmos Shaul ben Kish. he realized that those destructive malachim came because he spoke disparagingly about Shaul. So he says, I apologize to you, bones of Shaul. Okay? Next night, Hadar Chaza Siyuta Bechame. Next night, he had the same dream, the destructive group of angels. And what does he say? Amar, Na'anesi lachem atzaos Shaul ben Kish Melech Yisrael. Shaul said the first time when he apologized to Shaul, he just called him Shaul. But he did not call him King Shaul. And the Malachim, the destructive Malachim came back. The second night when he has the same dream, he realizes that he is not being proper with the covet. Ultimately, again, of Shaul. So I apologize to you, bones of Shaul Melech Yisrael. We'll say incredible. Amr Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Mipnei malo nimshecha malchus be'Shaul. We'll say ultimately, we'll listen to this profound Gemara. Why is it that the monarchy of Shaul did not endure? Now we'll say, the truth is, this is not really such a good kasha, because we know at the end of the day, Shaul was from the Shevet of Ephraim, right? Monarchy comes from the Shevet of Yehuda. But the Gemara wants to understand, why was it so short-lived? Why was it so short-lived? So the truth is, we know the answer to that also, right? The answer to that was because of the episode with Amalek. We just saw that before. But the Gemara is kind of saying, like on a global level, it almost appears like this monarchy was never really fated to go ahead and last. So why was it that the monarchy had such a short shelf life? So we'll say this is incredible. Mipnei shelo haya bashum dofi. We'll get ready for this answer. The Gemara says, because Shaul's genealogy, his pedigree, was too perfect. There were no genealogical blemishes in Shaul's family tree. Da Amr Rabbi Yochanan Mishra Rabbi Shimon ben Yosadak ein ma'amidin parnes ala tzibor ela imkin kupa shel shratzim tuluya lo me'achora. Let's listen to this, because Rabbi Shimon ben Yosadak says we only appoint a leader upon the Jewish people if he has a bag of shratzim hanging around his neck. They will say, what does that mean? We only appoint leaders who have genealogical imperfections. Why, says the Gemara? Because the Gemara says, She'im tazuach daitu alav. Because if he becomes a Baal Gaiva, if he becomes very arrogant, then what? Omrim lo chazar lacharacha. We tell him, look what's behind you. Look what's behind this. So we'll say this is actually an incredible issue. We've spoken about this before. If you think about again our monarchy, Davidic monarchy, which is not just monarchy, but the very line of Mashiach. So we'll say, where does David HaMelech come from? So remember again, first there's the whole strange episode with Yehuda and Tamar. Strange episode. And then I will say David HaMelech descends from Gerim, right? Descends from Rus HaMoaviyah. If you look at general monarchy prides itself on a pure bloodline, on a pure genealogy. Yet our monarchy hails from these incredibly strange stories. It's by design to keep the monarchy humble. So if a monarch goes ahead and gets a little bit carried away with himself, you open up a Chumash, we say, by the way, let's learn about the Alter Baba, Alter Zayda, right? Let's learn about Yehuda and Tamar. All right, the monarchy gets a little bit carried away from himself. Just remember, you are a descendant of Gerim. You're a descendant of Rusam Avia, who was a very righteous woman. But again, she was a convert. She's not someone who was born into this. Again, incredible woman, tzadikes. But it's not the typical genealogy of monarchy. And the Gemara says it is by design in order to keep the monarchy humble. Incredible. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, Mipnei ma ne'enes Shaul. We'll say this is an incredible Gemara. Why was Shaul punished? Or we'll say, remember, the Gemara has already answered these questions, but the Gemara is trying to kind of understand that sometimes you read certain stories and it almost seems like the individual was doomed. It almost seems like Shaul from the beginning was not destined. His monarchy was not destined to last. He was not destined. What happened? So we'll say this is so profound. Mipnei shemachal al kvodo. Because we'll say ultimately again, Shaul was mochal on his kavod. Shaul did not demand his honor. He was mevater. He just kind of gave in on his honor. He did not stand. Sorry, word machal al kvodo. He yielded his honor. Shnei amar ubenei bili al amru. Ma Yoshienu Zevi Vazeu, Velohevio Mincha, Vaikamachrish, because when Shaul was first appointed king, people disparaged him. Who is this guy that he's going to save us? Who is this guy that he's going to do anything for us? And they did not bring him tribute. And what happens? Uksiv, Vaya, and Vaikamachrish. And what was Shaul's reaction? Shaul's reaction was he was quiet. Uksiv, Vayal Nachash Ha'amoni Vayichal Yafesh Gibal. And immediately afterwards, Nachash Ha'amoni, right, the enemies of the Jewish people, Ammon marched on Eretz Yisrael. So we'll see something amazing. That the Melech, and in many respects, those in positions of leadership, of course, I will say, any person, you don't always stand up for your kavod, because at the end of the day, sometimes it's just good to yield. But a leader has an obligation to make sure that his kavod remains intact, because his kavod is not his kavod. If he's the king, it's the monarchy. As we'll see in just a little bit, if it's a Talmud Chacham, it's the kavod of Torah. So although there are times where you let things go, and you could be mochel on your kavod, for the leader, for the melech, ultimately, again, there are times where he must demand proper respect. Because if there's an erosion of respect, then there's an erosion of authority of the office. Whether it's for the melech, whether it's for the manig, and the Gemara goes right to it. This. And therefore Shaul is punished because people disparaged him and he did not say anything. He did not say anything. So the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan Mishra B'Shem Ben Yosef, the Kol Talmid Chacham, top of Chav Gimel, Shenonoki Menoter Kenachash. This is an interesting Gemara. Any Talmid Chacham who doesn't take revenge like a snake, Eino Talmid Chacham, is not a Talmid Chacham. Now I will say, this is actually very interesting. What does this mean? Right? Nekima, Netir, Gemara says, 1 second. Really, a Talmid Chacham is supposed to take revenge? Vaksiv, lo sikim, lo sitar. But the Torah says you're not allowed to take revenge. Now I will say, remember again, we'll discuss the difference between Nekima and Netira. We'll translate them both as revenge right now, but we're going to see there are different types of revenge. So the Gemara says, how can you tell me? So we'll say the Gemara says the Talmid Chacham has to take revenge. And if he doesn't take revenge like a snake, he's not the Talmid Chacham. But the Torah says he's not allowed to take revenge. Hahu b'mamanhu. Dichsev. We will say, interesting enough, that's referring to financial matters. The Talmid Chacham should not take revenge when it comes to financial matters. But if someone is pogame in his kavod, if somebody goes ahead and diminishes or somehow chips away at the kavod of the Talmid Chacham should not take it sitting down. He should bite back. Now, both say, now the logic of the Gemara is, although we're going to refine it much more, the logic of the Gemara is that the kavod of a Talmid Chacham is the kavod of Torah. And when one disparages the Talmid Chacham, they're disparaging Torah and by extension disparaging the Ribono Shel Olam. There are certain things you could just take and kind of let slide, and there are other things that a person has to stand up for. So a person goes ahead and maligns the Talmid Chacham, person maligns Torah, the Talmid Chacham must take revenge like a snake. What that means, we'll see. So also listen to this. Tichsiv, Disanya, Ezui Nikima Vezu Natira. But interesting Gemara. What's Nikima? What's Natira? Like I said before, we translate them both as revenge. But in fact, they're different forms of revenge. The Gemara says, Amrlo, Hishilani Magalcha. I go over to Reuven and say, Reuven, can you lend me your axe? Amrlo Lav, and Reuven says no. Lamachar Amrlo Hashilina Kardumecha. So the next day, or actually Magalcha saw, the next day Reuven comes to me and he says, can I borrow your axe? And I say to him, Amrlo Eini Mashilcha Kidera Shlo Hishaltani. And I say, Reuven, no, I'm not going to lend you my axe because you would not lend me your saw. So he Nikima. We'll say that's revenge. That's revenge. When I ask you for something, you don't do it for me, and then you ask me for something, and I say no to you because I'm getting you back for the way you wronged me. That's the kima. What's Netira? Supposed to listen to this. Amrullah Hashilini Kardumech. I go over to her and say, Reuven, can you lend me your axe? Amrullah Lo. And Reuven says no. Lamachar Amrullah Hashilini Chalukecha. The next day Reuven comes over to me and says, can I borrow your jacket? Amrullah, and I say to him, Heilich. I say, of course. Eini kamoscha, shelo hishaltani. And I say to them, of course you can borrow it. You know why? I'm not like you. I'm not like you. But I'll say that's Netira. So I'll say, interestingly enough, Netira is where I don't take revenge in the act, but I harbor animosity in my heart. So that's the difference. Nekima means, right, taking revenge means, you did to me, I'm going to do the same thing back to you. Netira means, you did to me, I'm going to show you that I'm better than you, but I still harbor this animosity towards you. So he netira. So the Gemara says, Rabbi, so listen to this. So therefore, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is as follows. When the Torah says, lo sikim lo sitar, so that refers to financial matters, and that's the examples the Gemara gives. But when it says that Talmid Chacham is supposed to take revenge, that apparently refers to the fact that if people make the Talmid Chacham suffer, or if people humiliate the Talmid Chacham, for that the Talmid Chacham is obligated to go ahead and take revenge. I will say it's very strong Gemara. It's not just you can, it's that Talmid Chacham is obligated. And remember again, that's the comparison with the Gemara in Shaul. The Gemara is saying Shaul was punished, Shaul lost the monarchy because he did not quote unquote take revenge. He did not respond when he should have responded. So the Gemara says, Utsara de Gufelo. So is that true? when it comes to personal suffering, right? When it comes to humiliation or degradation, that there's no problem taking revenge to the Talmid Chacham. But we learned, Vatanya Bas, a very profound Gemara, Hane Elavin ve'enon ulvin, Shomin Cherpasam en Mashir. Rabbi say, those who are disparaged, but do not disparage in return, right? Those who hear their degradation, but do not respond. O Sine Ava, Usmechin B'Yisurin. Serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with love and rejoice in suffering. Aleina Kasav Omer, about them the pasuk says, Va'ohavav kitzeis hashemesh bigvuraso. About them the pasuk says, and his beloved ones will shine as the sun in his brightness. So Rabbi says, interestingly enough, so you see from here that there is a concept of taking revenge, even jest with your own humiliation. The Gemara says, the Gemara extols the individual who goes ahead and is degraded, but doesn't respond. There's a certain power. We all know this, right? We teach this to our children from a young age. There's a certain power in restraint. Just because someone hurts you does not mean you respond in kind. So what's going on over here with the Talmid Chacham? Yet the Gemara is telling me that the Talmid Chacham is obligated to take revenge. Liolam dinakit lebelibe. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Well, so this is incredible. The Talmid Chacham himself does not go ahead and take revenge. But the Talmid Chacham also doesn't have to forget about the hurt that was visited upon him. And if someone else is ready to take revenge on behalf of the Talmid Chacham need not stop that individual. So if someone sees the degradation of the Talmid Chacham, and that person wants to take revenge on behalf of the Talmid Chacham need not intervene to stop that person from what he's doing. Rava said, so we'll say about 1 second, don't we always extol the power of being ma'avir amidosav? What does it mean to be ma'avir amidosav? To be an easygoing, forgiving person. And yet here the Gemara is saying that the Talmid Chacham is able to go ahead and hold on to this animosity. And even if he himself is not going to take revenge, at the end of the day, if someone else wants to take revenge on his behalf, he need not stop that individual. But don't we always learn that it's good to be ma'avir amidosav, it's good to be a forgiving person? Rabbi says, it's incredible. To which the Gemara says, yeah, that's true if the person who hurt me is trying to make amends. Right? If the person who hurt me is trying to apologize, yes, then of course I should accept. I have to go and be an easy to forgive, noach lirzos, an easy to forgive person, right? Or a person who easily forgives, right? And a person ultimately, again, who is mevatr, is mavri amidosav. But if the person who hurt the Talmid Chacham doesn't care and is not trying to ask for forgiveness, the Talmid Chacham has every single right to nurture that animosity. And even though he himself may not go ahead and take that revenge, at the end, if somebody wants to avenge the wrongs of the Talmid Chacham need not stop that individual. And I will say, so that's the conclusion of the Gemara. But what I will tell you something very interesting. There's a difference between, just because you have a right to do something, does not mean that it's a good idea. So what the Gemara says is the Talmid Chacham has a right to take revenge. However that revenge manifests itself. And clearly has a right to harbor and nurture negative feelings towards someone who has wronged him. And I will say, of course, on one level, what the Gemara is teaching us is that sometimes Talmid Chacham represents Torah. I will say, when there is an affront to Torah, there is an obligation to stand up. Now again, you have to know when to stand up, and you have to know how to stand up, and to whom to stand up. That's a very delicate dance. But when something is an affront to Torah, to the Ribono Shel Olam, you can't just take it sitting down. There has to be a macha, there has to be an objection, there has to be a response. So the Gemara is saying Talmid Chacham is even permitted to go ahead and nurture animosity. So I'll say again, I want to point out, like I said before, just because you can doesn't mean it's a good idea. Rabbi Dr. Abraham Tversky, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, has a beautiful statement where he says that harboring a grudge is allowing someone to live in your head rent-free. So just because you are permitted to nurture animosity towards the other does not mean that it's a good idea. Because at the end of the day, it occupies prime waterfront emotional real estate, right? No one would put a sandbox on their waterfront lot because it's just not the right use of waterfront real estate. There's only a limited amount of emotional real estate. And if you occupy it with the wrong things, you really go ahead and put yourself at a disadvantage. So even though you might have a right, the Talmid Chacham may have a right to nurture some animosity towards the other one, Having a right to do something doesn't always mean that it's dafka the right thing to do. In general, whenever harboring ill will, nurturing animosity, bearing a grudge towards the other, a person always has to ask themselves a simple question. Is it worth tying up my emotional real estate with this negativity? I think that more often than not, the answer to that is no. The answer to that is no. However terrible the trespass, however terrible the slight, at the end of the day, it's so much better for me to let go of the negativity, stop occupying precious emotional real estate, and move on and accomplish great things in life. The Gemara goes weiter. Umahin Moses. Let's remember again, back to the Mishnah. Remember again, the Mishnah said that if there was a tie, so the Kohanim would go ahead and stick out fingers, right? They would do a count off. So the Gemara says, Hashta, shtayim otzin achasibai. So I'll say, remember again, so the Mishnah said they could either extend one finger or two fingers. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Once you tell me they could extend two fingers, then obviously they what? Could extend one finger. We'll say, interestingly, the Gemara says, no. Really what it means is like this. You're actually only allowed to extend one finger. But if a Kohen was ill, and let's say therefore was unable to, let's say, go ahead and control his fingers well, so he extended two fingers, then we would let him do that. Vatanya, but we learned, Achas motzian, Stein ein motzian. But we have another brayso that says a Kohen could only extend one finger for the count off and not two. When is that? So we'll say again, if a Kohen was healthy, we tell him yes, only one finger. But if he was a chola and he couldn't help but extend two fingers, that was fine. So the Gemara says, furthermore, again, there were individuals who would stick out two fingers, but even if he stuck out two fingers, on both sides, the memuna would only count one. It's very interesting. So remember, even if he had two fingers extended, those two fingers were only counted as one. Ve'ein monolo el achos, is that true? V'atanyo, ein motzion lo shlish v'lo gudol mipnei ramoim. We'll say, when during the count, you can't extend a middle finger, nor can you extend the thumb, because of the people who were tricksters. Now we'll say, we'll discuss exactly how people play tricks with the thumbs. So the Gemara says, if a person extended a middle finger, you could count the middle finger, but we don't count thumbs. Furthermore, we'll say, if you stuck out a middle finger or a thumb, you got hit by the mamuna with a pakia. We'll discuss what that means also. But we'll say, what this sounds like is, if you stuck out multiple fingers, you would be counted multiple fingers. My mon and lo nami achas. To which the Gemara says, no. Even if you end up extending multiple fingers, the halach is, I will say, they would only count one. So I will say, it's interesting Gemara. So at the end of the day, each Kohen only got counted once, no matter how many fingers he had extended. Whether you extended extra fingers to try to place some shtick, or you extended extra fingers because you were a chola, the fingers were only counted as one. So Bossi is interesting. So the Gemara now said before, if you stuck out a middle finger or a thumb, you got hit by the coin with a pakia. My pakia, amarav madra. Ras is a madra. Thank you. My madra. So what's a madra? Says the Gemara. Amarav papa mitarka detai de pasik resha. This is the whip that the Arabs used to go ahead and hit their horses, to go ahead and move faster, the psik resha, that has a split tip. So I'll say, so apparently again it was a whip, and the top of the whip had a split tip. It was split into a bunch of different parts. So that's what the Arabs would use to whip their horses to go faster. And I will say again, halacha l'maisa, if you are a kohen who played shtick, and the kohen, the mamuna, caught you extending more than one finger, you would get clapped with the pakia. Good. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar Abaye, Meresh Hava Amina Hadisnan Ben Bivai Mamuna Ala Pakia. So we'll say. So remember again, Abaye is supposed to just going a little bit further with this. The Mishnah says Ben Bivai, he was in charge of the Pakia. So Abaye says in the beginning, I thought Amina Psulta. I thought Pakia meant wicks. Gidisnan mivlae michnasei kohanim umehem yain mehen hayu mafkin bahen ubahen hayu madlikin. Because we'll say, as we'll see a little bit later on, from the worn out clothing of the kohanim, they used to make wicks, and those were the wicks which were used to kindle the menorah, or I should say to kindle the menorah, to kindle the courtyard. We'll see. So the Gemara says, "Pakevan dishamar alei dehadisanya v'lo od el sholkim min amamona bepakia aminan my pakia nagdan." Abaye says, but now that I heard that, what does pakia mean? Pakia doesn't mean wicks. Rather, what does pakia mean? Pakia means whip. Then I realized that ultimately, again, when it says Ben Bivai was in charge of the pakia, he was the guy who would clap the kohanim who were pulling shtick with the count. That if you extended an extra finger, you got patched with the pakia. Incredible. Remember again, the Mishnah told the story in the beginning, before they instituted a lottery for the Trumas Hadeshin, there were two kohanim who were running up the ramp, and one pushed the other off the ramp, and the one who fell off broke his leg. After that, they instituted the lottery. Says the Gemara, it's an overwhelming story. Two kohanim were racing up the ramp to see who was going to get there first in order to do Trumas Hadeshin. What happened? One of them again was within 4 amos of his friend. Natal sakin v'taka lo belibo. And I both say the kohanim, I guess the coin who was losing or was being gained on, see, he took out a knife and he stabbed the other coin in the heart. So we'll say an overwhelming story. Amar Rabbi Tzadok Amaylos Ha'ulam. Rabbi Tzadok got up and he stood on the stairs of the Beis Hamikdash. Va'amar Achenu Beis Yisrael Shimu. My brothers, right? Beis Yisrael, listen. Hari Omer Ki Matzei Chala Ba'adama V'yotzu Zekinecha V'shovtecha. The pasuk says, if you find a dead body on the earth, the elders and the judges will come out. Anu amila havi egla arufa. Who now we have a dead kohen. Who should bring the egla arufa? Ala ira ala hazaros. Should it be the people in the city of Yerushalayim, the people in the Beis Hamikdash? Go kala am bebechia. And the entire nation began to cry. Rabbi Tzadok was lamenting. Do you see what just happened here in the Beis Hamikdash? So we'll say the story goes on. Ba aviv shal tinok. So the father of this young man, Rabbi say, it calls the stabbed kohen a tinok. Now tinok is not, of course, not literally tinok. It means he was a young man. The father of the young man came. He heard what happened to his son. Va'amar umatzu kishu mefarfer. And he saw his son was not yet dead. So the son was stabbed in the heart, was not yet dead, but was good. Mefarfer means like what do you call it? Mefarfer means like shaking. It's the pre-death rattle. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but he's some convulsing. Right in the throes of death. Amar harehu kaparasam. My son should be our kapara. Va'adayin b'ni mefarfer. My son is still convulsing. He's not yet dead. V'lo nitma sakin. The knife that was used to stab him is not yet tamei. Remove it from the Beis Hamikdash. L'lamdecha shekash sha'aleim taras kilim yoser mishvichos damim. We see Rabbi say that the nature of the generation was that ritual purity, taras kelim, was more important to them than bloodshed. Now we'll see exactly what to do with that statement. What exactly does that mean? V'chinu omer sotu, it says, v'gam dam naki shafach menashe harbe me'od ada sharmile Yisrael pelapeh. Menashe shed so much blood until literally again from one end of Yerushalayim to the other end of Yerushalayim was filled with blood. So we'll say, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Hi Maisa. So we'll say, so now we have two stories. So this episode, I will say, of one coin stabbing the other, Hi Maisa Kadim. Which now we'll say we have one story of one coin stabbing another, and another story of a coin pushing the other off the ramp. Which story came first? If the story of the stabbing came first, Hashta ashlichos damim lo takinu paisa anishbar raglo takinu. So we'll say if they didn't establish a lottery after a stabbing, they only established a lottery after the pushing. It doesn't seem to make sense. Ella dinishbar raglo kadim. Rather, it must be that the case of where one coin pushed the other, that story came first. But if that's the case, v'kevan de takinu paisa arba amos maya v'detayu. If that's the case that that the story of the shoving came first, they instituted the lottery after that story, then why was there even a race of two Kohanim going up the ramp that led one to stab the other? It was already being decided by lottery. Ella li olum d'shvichos damim kadim. Rather, again, I will say that unfortunately the story of the stabbing came first. But yet, interestingly enough, they did not institute the lottery after the story of the stabbing. Why not? Umeikar savar akrei ba'almahu. Both say because they figured this was an outlier. This was such an, this was not the norm. This was a horrific situation. They didn't feel the need to enact legislation because they thought that this episode was such an aberration. However, Kevan dechazi afilu mamela asule de sakana takin rabbanan paisa. But I will say, after they saw now that again another episode happened, and again, all right, it wasn't a stabbing, but it was a shoving, they realized, you know what, we have to legislate this, and that's when they instituted, ultimately again, the pious, the lottery. Which I will say something very interesting also. In general, you see this, that when Chazal legislate things, legislation is not usually a reaction to extreme circumstances. Because you can't legislate for extreme circumstances. We legislate for normative circumstances. So they didn't legislate after the episode of the stabbing, because they felt that that was an aberration. But once again, the episode of the shoving happened, realized, okay, there's a certain amount of aggressive behavior that's happening. That's when they began legislation. So we'll say now the Gemara goes back. Amar Rabbi Tzadok Amalo Sa'ulam va'Amar Achinu Beis Yisrael Shimuna Hariyu Omer Ki Matzei Chala Ba'adama Ana Namila Havi Ala Ira Ala Azara. So we'll say after the stabbing, Rabbi Tzadok gets up and he cries out to the people, who's going to bring the Egla Arufa for this young Kohen who was stabbed? Is it going to be the residents of Yerushalayim? Is it going to be the Kohanim of the Beis Hamikdash? The Gemara says, well, 1 second. The Yerushalayim Bas Isuyi Egla Arufahu? Do you bring an Egla Arufa for a corpse that's found in Yerushalayim? Vatanya, Asara Dvarim Nemer B'Yerushalayim V'zuachas, and there's 10 things that are unique about Yerushalayim, and one of them is, Amad Beis, Eina Mavia Egla Arufa. Yerushalayim does not bring an Egla Arufa. Furthermore, V'od, Lo Nada Miko Ksiv, V'hanada Miko. Further, you're going to say, when do you bring an Egla Arufa? When you don't know who killed the individual. I'm going to say, here, this was in broad daylight, everybody saw it happen. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Rather, Elikadei laharbos bebechia. Rabbi Tzadok was not coming to go ahead and make an actual statement. Well, he wasn't going ahead and making an actual halachic statement, but rather he was saying something to elicit emotion. Who is going to bring the Egla Arufa? Who is going to atone for this incredible and terrible tragedy that has just unfolded, I will say, right inside of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash? Literally on the ramp of the Mizbeach, one Kohen is stabbing another. Reb Tzadok says, how are we ever going to atone for this? He wasn't making a halachic statement, he was making an emotional statement. Then I will say, the Gemara analyzes the last part of the story. Ba'oviv shel tinok u'matzek shumefarfer. Amar hariyu kaparasam va'adayin bini kaim. So also remember again, then the father of the dying Kohen comes. And once you have to imagine the scene, he sees his son dying, convulsing in the throes of death. My son should be a kapara, but quick, remove the knife, because my son is not yet dead, therefore the knife has not become tameh. So I will say, the Bryce ended off by saying, Lamdecha to teach you, shekashalim taras kelim, yosef mishvichos damim. That literally, they took taras kelim, ritual purity of utensils, they treated it with even more severity than murder. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Iboilahu, shvichos damim hu dezal, aval taras kelim kidekaima kaima. Does it say that unfortunately, there was less, that they were desensitized to murder, but they maintained their sensitivity to ritual impurity? O Dilma, shvichos damim kidekaima kaima. Or no. They had a sensitivity to murder, but they just had even a heightened sensitivity to ritual purity or impurity. So Tashma, the Gemara says, well, look at the end of the Brisa. Midikanosiv le tamuda v'gam dam naki shafach minasha shmamina shvichus damim hu dezal v'taras kelim kidekaima kaima. Also remember again, how does the Brisa end? The Brisa quotes the pasuk from Menashe, and it says Menashe had engaged in such widespread bloodshed that literally Yerushalayim was filled with blood from one end of the city to the other. So what do you see from here, Rabosai? That unfortunately there was a total decline in the appreciation of human life. Bloodshed was so commonplace. That was, and I want to point out over here, bloodshed was so commonplace. What Menashe did was he desensitized the general populace towards bloodshed. There was such a desensitization towards bloodshed that ultimately, again, that even the father of this child, when he comes, as he's sad to see his child killed, of course, goes without saying. But at the end of the day, they were so used to bloodshed that the father has the presence of mind to speak about the Taras Kalim. So we'll say two incredible lessons that come out of this. So first, we'll say in general, how careful we have to be with misplaced priorities. So we'll say because sometimes a person could go ahead and uphold a value, but that value pales in comparison, ultimately again to the other values that are being trampled on. In other words, Taras Kalim is incredibly important. But at the end of the day, bloodshed, when you see bloodshed happening in the Mikdash, that's first and foremost. The fact that the father is preoccupied with the ritual purity of the knife when his son has just been stabbed represents a society which has misplaced priorities. And I both say, again, this is maisim b'chol yom. There could be many important priorities, but certain priorities can trample upon others. Ritual Taras Kalim, of course, is incredible importance. But Taras Kalim, when you see murder happening inside of the Beis HaMikdash, misplaced. It also shows us how ultimately, again, over time, we can become desensitized to things. We'll say, and just when the misplaced priorities, we'll say, there's so much to say about this because I happen to think this is one of the great challenges that we face in contemporary society today. Just a great sense of misplaced priorities. It is important to stand up for injustice, any kind of injustice, racial injustice, other forms of injustice. But just because you're standing up for injustice does not give you the right to go ahead and inflict other injustices. There's always this balance that you have to be so careful that in the pursuit of one form of justice, in holding up certain values, you don't trample on others. So Taras Kalim is important, but it's not more important ultimately again than loss of life in the Beis HaMikdash. It also teaches us just about how we become desensitized to things. And I will say this is so incredibly important because we change over the course of life without even realizing that we've changed. Whether it's that a person takes certain religious liberties, and at the end of the day, I don't even realize that I've so fundamentally changed myself in taking those religious liberties, in taking those spiritual liberties, until one day and again, that's what happened over here. Menashe desensitized them. When I go ahead and I engage in the same behavior over and over and over, I desensitize myself to the wrongness of that behavior, to the point where I don't even think about it anymore. We'll say, here's an extreme example of this. Bloodshed had become so commonplace that no one even thought about it. That's the power of desensitizing yourself to evil. Ultimately, again, it becomes something that you just accept as a reality of life. An incredible Gemara. So the Gemara goes right to turn on. So we'll say the pasuk is talking about the removal of the ash. Now let's just talk about this for just a moment. When it comes to removal of ash, it happens in two ways. There is the everyday Trumas Hadeshan, which is, remember again, removing some of the ash from the Mizbeach, but it's just a little bit of ash. And then there's the Hotza'as Hadeshan. Hotza'as Hadeshan means that when the ash on the top of the Mizbeach, that pile became too much, you would actually take it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. They would dispose of the ash somewhere outside. So the Gemara says that when taking out the ash, or true, there's also for Trumas Hadeshan, the Kohen has to wear begadim achirim. Shomani, kederach yom kippurim sheposh bigdei chodesh v'lovish bigdei chol. I might have thought that the begadim achirim of the Trumas Hadeshan or Hotza'as Hadeshan are maybe unconsecrated garments, just like the Kohen on Yom Kippur wears regular white garments, which for him are regular weekday, right? That's the equivalent of regular weekday garments. Talmud Lomar upashat es begadav v'lavash begadim achirim. Therefore, the pasuk says he shall take off his bigdei kahuna and wear other clothing. Makish begadim shalovish lebegadim shaposhet. The Torah is equating the clothing the Kohen puts on for Trumas Hadeshan with the clothing he takes off. Ma lahalon bigdei kodesh, afkan bigdei kodesh. Just like the clothing he was wearing are bigdei kodesh, so too again Abba said the clothing he wears for Trumas Hadeshan are also bigdei kodesh. Imkain ma talmud lomar achirim. So why does the Torah say he changes into other clothing? What does that mean? Bechusin mehen. It means that halacha l'maisa, he wears clothing of lesser value. Now, both of these is incredibly important. So what the Gemara says inside the Rambam Paskins as well. The Kohen would change his regular bigdei kahuna to take out the ash. right? What would he put on? He still wore Bigdei Kahuna, but he put on like worn out Bigdei Kahuna. Used the Bigdei Kahuna. So he would change out of the nice Bigdei Kahuna and put on the used Bigdei Kahuna. But Lazar Omer Achirim V'Hotzi Limed Al Kohanim Bali Mumen Shekshon Hotzi Adeshin. Rabbi Eliezer learns that the juxtaposition of Achirim V'Hotzi teaches us that even Kohanim who would not normally be fit for avoda, let's say because of a mum, were permitted to go ahead and take out the ash. Amar Mar Achirim Pechusim Kedisan Rabbi Deber Bishmol Detan Deber Bishmol Begadim Shebi Shaban Keder L'Rabo Lo Yimzo Kos L'Rabo. Because I will say again, why does the Kohanim wear different clothing for Trumas Hadeshen? Because the same way that the servant doesn't cook, or say doesn't serve his master in the same clothing he cooked in. Right? Interesting mashal. Right? When you right in the kitchen, you wear right when you're preparing the meal, you wear certain clothing. You change your clothing before you serve the master. So too, when you go out and you take out the ash, that's like cooking in the kitchen. You wear certain clothing, but then you change your clothing into better clothing when doing the avodah inside of the Beis Hamikdash. Amrei Shlakish k'machlokes ba'otzar. But we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up a Meretz Hashem with Amrei Shlakish. Michael.